2020 Democratic presidential candidates may have agreed to stop attacking each other in public, but that agreement does not include former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. With the Nevada caucus just 5 days away, frontrunners have turned their attention to Bloomberg, who is skipping the state. CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett has more on why Democrats are angry.
The American people are sick and tired of billionaires buying elections.
Bloomberg's approach seeks to turn the nomination process, with its emphasis on early contest and momentum building, on its head.
Jobs creator, leader, problem solver.
He's on track to spend more than $415 million before Super Tuesday. That's when he'll be on ballots for the first time and where he hopes to vault into contention for the Democratic nomination.
I think he cannot hide behind the airwaves and the money.
Bloomberg is also facing criticism for his support of stop and frisk. He has apologized for the anti-crime tactic that allowed police to search suspects without a warrant. From 2011 to 2012, more than 80% of those stopped were black or Latino. Nearly 90% were found to be innocent.
$60 billion can buy you a lot of advertising, but it can't erase your record.
Bloomberg is also under fire for lawsuits filed over the years alleging that he created a culture of sexual harassment at his company. In a statement, the Bloomberg campaign responded, quote, "Mike simply does not tolerate any kind of discrimination or harassment."
We in our party hold ourselves to the highest standard, and it is going to be critical for us to have a nominee who can authentically lead.
Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, seized on Bloomberg's past comments on stop and frisk.
The philosophy was to castigate and denigrate people of color,
ignoring President Trump's support for the practice, which he advocated for in Chicago in 2018.
Stop and frisk. It works, and it was meant for problems like Chicago. It was meant for it. Stop and frisk.
I find this topic so fascinating. Joining me now with more is New York Times reporter Nicholas Kulish. So, Nick, you could say that Bloomberg's approach here isn't exactly conventional. Why has his name risen in polls despite not taking a single debate stage?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that, by our calculations, he spent over $400 million as of January 31st. You can sort of feel the ripple when his ads start running in a state. You start hearing from people, who is this guy? What's he doing? And he does have a record to run on. 12 years running New York City with its 8 million people makes him a chief executive of a larger area than all but I think about 12 states.
Well, so you took a deep dive into the numbers when it comes to his spending. And according to your reporting, Michael Bloomberg is the top presidential campaign self-funder. So break that down for me a little bit more. What does his spending tell us about the influence he has across the country?
Sure. Well, you can break his spending down into a couple of different categories, right? And I think that the campaign self-funding is the one that we talk about the most. It's the easiest. It's the most obvious. We all see the ads when we watch, your shows or when we look at Facebook. But then he's also putting a significant amount of money through, as the graphic that you just had up shows, through philanthropy. He's giving money for gun control. He's giving money for the Sierra Club to close coal plants. He's giving money to mayors all across the country for pet programs or to help them sort of, improve their services. So he's basically kind of spread $10 billion around the country in various political and philanthropic ways in the past 20 years. And that buys you a lot of friends and a lot of support.
Well, so speak a little bit more to that. Is Bloomberg cashing in on that generous spending?
Listen, cashing in, saying that or implying more of a quid pro quo than you can necessarily see is a step that you don't want to take. But when you look at all of his first campaign stops just about were with people who he had supported either directly or indirectly, he was sort of hopscotching through cities where mayors that he had given, $1 million for a public art installation or help with obesity or opioids or any number of different issues. And I think it's a little more complicated than sort of, buying someone's support. It's more, can you really say no to having a press conference with someone who gave you $1 million, even if you don't quite go all the way to endorsing them?
Now, I think this is a question that's on a lot of people's minds. Is it fair to compare Bloomberg's spending to Trump's over the years?
If you're talking about on his campaign, he's long since left Trump way behind. Trump actually has a very robust fundraising operation, whereas Michael Bloomberg has said that he's going to pay for the whole thing himself. He really, he's actually already in inflation-adjusted terms, and you're putting this up there, spent more than Ross Perot did for a pretty serious bid at actually winning in the general. And so, it's really quite unprecedented what he's done.
Now, Nicholas, in your reporting, you spent a lot of time on Everytown for gun safety. Why is this a key to understanding Bloomberg's relationship between policy and charity?
Sure. Everytown is on the one hand something I think that he feels very passionately about, right? I think that gun safety is a real issue for Mayor Bloomberg and not something that he is cynically involved in. But at the same time, Everytown supports candidates. It's out there. He rented the list of volunteers. He paid, I believe it was $3.2 million to have the email lists of the very same people whose protest movement he was underwriting to a large extent. So you can see there's a lot of commingling there of issues and goals, even as, of course, many of his supporters would say this is an important cause that he's gotten behind.
Now, this is a man who has certainly stirred up some controversy in the past, and that's something that a lot of the Democratic candidates are zeroing in on right now. You also touched on his past, not only stop and frisk, but about the comments he made about Me Too. Will Democrats be able to look past his controversial history in order to beat President Trump? And does that discredit the message they have spent 4 years building?
I think that this is really the central question right now in the primary, and some people, obviously, I think it's way too early to count out your Amy Klobuchar's or your Pete Buttigieg's, but there's a certain part of the party that is starting to see this as sort of like billionaire who can bias the election versus Bernie Sanders, the pure candidate, interestingly, both people who were for a really, really long time independents. But I think this is really what we're getting down to, right? Which is can the party say you pay for our campaigns, you can blow Trump out of the water with money, we'll just close our eyes and go with you, or is it going to be we want the candidate that most reflects kind of the populist moment or the left-leaning moment in the party?
Yeah, well, we'll be looking forward to Super Tuesday. That'll be a big litmus test for Mike Bloomberg. Nicholas Kulish, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.